Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Political Vigilante. My name is Graham Elwood. Always great to have one of my favorite investigative journalists, Whitney Webb, on the show. Whitney, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well, all things considered. So thanks for asking.
It's just like there's such a but after anytime how's everything going? Like we all have to say, yeah, considering there's this whatever, there's a global pandemic, there's a crazy person in the White House, there's the Democrats have a nobody that's another old crazy guy going. Other than that,
yeah,
things are okay. So I wanted to talk to you because you have and I'm going to just bring this up on your website now, Unlimited Hangout, a new. Let me share this screen with the audience real quick because it's more. It's just kind of insane.
Yeah, it's definitely insane. Though it was published on Unlimited Hangout for patrons. The public release was on The Last American Vagabond because this is sort of the introductory article, I guess you could say, to a series that's going to be collaborative with the rest of the people at TLAV, Last American Vagabond, all about Operation Warp Speed. So
okay, so I'm going to bring this up here because the link you gave me was on Operation Hangout. That in there real quick. So I want. So we're going to get into this Operation Warp Speed. This is just one of the reasons I love having you on the show is you you do deep dives on things. And so
yeah,
that's so here's the article, everybody. I'll just read it for everybody. Operation Warp Speed is using a CIA-linked contractor to keep COVID-19 vaccine contracts secret. Yes. So this is like, I was reading this before the interview today, and I'll read it for everybody right now. And just the $6 billion in COVID-19 vaccine contracts awarded by Operation Warp Speed have been doled out by a secretive government contractor with deep ties to the CIA and DHS, escaping regulatory scrutiny and beyond the reach of Freedom of Information Act requests. Fill us in on this, Whitney.
So last week, while everyone was paying attention to the debates, and then Trump's like, I have COVID, the whole thing, right? All these revelations were coming about Operation Warp Speed, and they are honestly very chilling. And I'm honestly amazed that more outlets haven't picked up on it. As a couple things really quick. The first one came out the day of the debate. It was the release of the organizational chart of Operation Warp Speed. Supposedly, Operation Warp Speed is a joint project or joint effort, rather, between the Department of Defense, the military, and the Department of Health and Human Services, or HHS. However, this organizational chart came out, and it's almost entirely the military or military intelligence, and very few quote-unquote civilians are involved in this operation. Most of the people that are in charge have no experience in the field of healthcare or in vaccine production, and the only two people with vaccine production experience are honestly mad scientist level crazy. Monsef Salawi and a guy that used to run the creepiest portfolio at DARPA, the research agency of the Pentagon. Those are their two vaccine experts for Operation Warp Speed. I'll be getting more into them in the coming days, but they're honestly, you just listen to their talks and they are honestly really disturbing. One of them talked about injecting people with chimpanzee DNA so that we can tolerate higher pathogen burdens. I mean, it's like mad scientist crazy. So the fact that they're keeping these vaccine contracts secret and allowing these people to do whatever, and they're doing it through a CIA-linked contractor, you know, on top of all of it is honestly nuts. And so I'm really amazed that more people aren't covering this, because this organizational chart came out from a mainstream media outlet. It's called Stat News. It's like a mainstream sort of healthcare focused website. And if you look at it
in your article,
no, this is why I started investigating this, basically. Okay. But it's all related. But if you go to Stat News and you look for an article, it's titled New document reveals scope and structure of Operation Warp Speed and underscores vast military involvement. That's the title. So if you wanted to search for that and find it. And essentially, Stat News says this looks increasingly like a military operation and not like a public health initiative like it's been sold to the public. So Operation Warp Speed from the beginning, when it was launched in May by the Trump administration, they said it was a public-private partnership aimed at delivering and researching, developing, and then distributing 300 million doses of a COVID-19 vaccine by January. And the reason the military initially justified their involvement in this was because they said they're good at logistics and supply chains. But in the middle of September, not that long ago, the official distribution strategy of Operation Warp Speed came out, and they didn't mention the military at all. And then the military comes out on the Defense Department website, and they say, well, actually, the expertise we bring to Operation Warp Speed is contracts, our ability to award contracts well and manage contracts. But it turns out that they're managing the contracts through this CIA-linked non-government intermediary, which is super shady. They're called Advanced Technology International, and their parent company is equally shady, called Analytic Services Inc., which used to be run by like deputy CIA directors for 20 years. So they're basically, doing this. I mean, there's so many different angles to this story. It's very unsettling on a lot of levels, and I think a lot more people should start looking into this. But essentially, by using this non-government intermediary, instead of having HHS or another part of the government make these contracts directly with vaccine companies, it means that you can't Freedom of Information Act request to get access to those vaccine contracts. And also HHS, which is supposedly overseeing half of this operation allegedly, claims they have no records of these contracts that have been made with vaccine companies. These vaccine contracts total $6 billion. And that's Operation Warp Speed has a $10 billion budget, so that's more than half. That's $6 billion that have been given to these vaccine companies. No one knows apparently what's going on with them at the Department of Health and Human Services, who you think would know. They claim to have no records. But also by using this intermediary to give out the contracts, it also means that the vaccine companies that get these contracts are exempt from federal safety regulations and federal oversight in a lot of U.S. laws that would normally apply to them if it was done directly. And this is very disturbing when you consider the fact that, for example, among the companies that have gotten these shady, secretive contracts that exempt them from federal safety regulations and things like that are Johnson & Johnson, who for decades knew there was asbestos in their baby powder and kept selling it. So out of all the companies, that you want to exempt from federal oversight, this is what's going on. And we're supposed to, believe that this is a peacetime initiative, right? That's going to be funded by American taxpayer funds to produce a vaccine for Americans. It's not wartime, right? But it's a military operation, essentially based on who's in charge, and they're being ultra secretive. They're not giving out these contracts. There's a lot of conflicts of interest there, and there's really no justifiable reason for the secrecy given the official purpose of the program, as we've been told.
Well,
it's nuts. I mean,
the first thing that popped into my mind was the last time we had you on the show, where you talked about you had uncovered this bipartisan effort to kind of ramp us into civil war, and the fact which they want to then use that as an excuse for martial law. And that's the first connection I made. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like, this would be part of their whole martial law plan. They push us into a civil war and make it a race thing when it's actually class warfare, and push everybody into, so all the big cities are completely destabilized and there's violence everywhere. So, we need martial law to clamp down. And now everybody needs to take this vaccine. Is that, am I getting too crazy tinfoil hat here? Or
well, I don't know. It's really possible. I mean, all these intelligence figures and groups are forecasting complete chaos in the U.S. by January 2021, when Operation Warp Speed is supposed to go live. So, given what's going on, I mean, it could happen, but I mean, I don't want to speculate too much, because this stuff is honestly, the documented facts of like the histories of the people involved and the stuff with the contracts and all this stuff is so nuts. I want people to just focus on the facts, you know, and not get too far ahead of ourselves, because, you know, I'm probably going to get smeared as a conspiracy theorist for this, saying that the vaccine is bad. And I'm not even like making that argument. I'm saying the way they're handling this, there's no reason for it. And we should not just be giving a blank check to, you know, intelligence fronts like Advanced Technology International, these shady vaccine companies. Or they're not all just vaccine companies. Johnson & Johnson's like a huge company, right? But we can't just be giving like a blank check to these corporations with bad track records for safety, right? And the military, you know, it doesn't make any sense, honestly. So,
yeah, those are all great points. Like, as I've said, and again, when you came on the show in the spring, when this all first started and we started to see the connections of Bill Gates, you know, eugenics and his ties to Epstein, I'm not an anti-vaxxer by any stretch of the imagination, but I am leery of these types of folks and organizations involved in this vaccine. I would love a vaccine that, oh, it's safe, it's good, we all take it, because I'd like to go back to telling jokes on the road. I mean, I really miss being a stand-up comic, but I don't trust. And again, the question that you're bringing up, and this is the key here for anybody watching, when somebody's like, oh, you know, Whitney Webb's a conspiracy, whatever, she doesn't believe.
I get called a lot of names. It's all right.
Like, it's like, no, it's not. I don't have a problem with the government spending money to find a vaccine. The government should be doing that. But why does it need to be so secretive? Why
does it need to be the military and people that have no experience in that? Right.
And why wouldn't the media be asking these questions as well? And then of course, every time there's some big crazy, oh my God, we have, you know, there's some big train wreck thing. Did you see what Trump tweeted? Or just that debate last week, which I was watching it going, this is an episode of Real Housewives of whatever. I mean, this is just,
it's the circus distracting people from real stuff that people need to pay attention to. Because, for example, with warp speed, just as an example, Biden said he'd continue that if he wins and Trump loses. So, I mean, regardless of which, you know, team of, you know, the bipartisan Hydra or whatever ends up winning the election, you know, you're still getting this shit.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Again, everyone's and the debate is just like this puppet show distraction. These oligarchs are just working these two puppets, and to get everybody to talk about it. And the way it's covered in this country is like sports, like who won it, who lost. And, you know, and it's just talked like a post, you know, playoff game X's and O's show, when it was like no policy was discussed on that debate. There was no, it wasn't.
That's what they want, though. Yeah. They don't want real policy discussed. You know, they want, oh, look, Trump is acting childish and Biden is acting senile, and like, let's talk about this superficial crap and not ever have any real meaningful discussion about policy. I mean, that's the whole point.
Right. Because if you did listen closely to the handful of little policy things, it was like, oh, both of these guys are against Medicare for all. Both of them are against a Green New Deal. Joe Biden said, I'm against it. Trump pinned him into a corner. He said, oh, I'm not a Green New Deal. And it was just like, and now he added, they both are in favor of this crazy warp speed thing.
Yeah.
And no one, why is it only people like us that why are we like this?
You know, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think I don't want to hate on anyone in particular or anyone in general, because I know that during election season, you know, there are a lot of people in independent media that focus on election stuff, right? And they're used to that. And like 4 years ago, that's what they did. The midterms, it's what they did, and so they're like in the mode of that. But you know, the stakes are really high this time, and the stakes have very little to do with whether Biden or Trump wins, based on what we can see taking shape now. You know, whether it's warp speed, whether it's this, I would argue, pre-planned chaos for on the day of the election and afterwards. There's a lot of things that are happening. I appreciate, efforts of people right now to make this new for a People's Party movement. But honestly, the time to do that was 2016. Unfortunately, people decided to trust St. Bernard, King Sheepherder, to sheepdog everyone into the Democratic Party corral that is like fundamentally corrupt. And so here we are hoping, thinking Biden's going to save us from fascism. You're getting fascism either way. So it's time to wake up. I mean, I don't mean to be like, I don't want to be mean or anything, right? But like the time to like talk about like, oh, we have to stop fascism by voting out Trump. Like the military is planning a bunch of shady stuff behind the scenes, and they do not care who wins. They're going to do theirs. They don't care. They don't want your opinion, Yeah,
you bring up such great points. Like, I love the idea of the Movement for People's Party. They asked me to speak at their convention. It was really cool, but they're still talking like, well, in 2024. And I'm just like,
no,
this ship is sailed, man. Like, we don't have the time.
There isn't time.
The environment is collapsing. And we, like you say, have been ramping into full on fascism. And this didn't start when Trump got elected. This started, I mean, decades ago. You really want to point a finger, 9/11, the Patriot Act. I mean, all of that stuff. Then the 19 years we've been at war in Afghanistan.
Yeah. And a lot of the same people involved in shady shit before September 11th and the anthrax attacks are also involved in this warp speed stuff, which we can get into in a second.
Okay. So let's definitely talk about that, because we've had you on the show. You talked about, we talked about Dark Winter.
The Dark Winter people are the parent company of this freaking thing giving out the contracts for Operation Warp Speed. Yeah. Let me break that down for people. So
explain, first of all, back up to anybody and just tell everybody what Dark Winter is, because some people have asked in the chat. They don't know what it is. I know we talked about it with several months ago, but give everybody a little backdrop on what Dark Winter is and how it ties into our Operation Warp Speed.
Okay, I really recommend people take the time to really learn what that was in depth. My first episode of my podcast was with Robbie Martin called Dark Winter Descends. My podcast is called Unlimited Hangout. That one's free to watch on or listen to on Rockfin. Please listen to it, or you can read the article I co-wrote with Raul Diego several months ago called All Roads Lead to Dark Winter, which is the beginning of a series called Engineering Contagion. I would also recommend part 3 of that series, which is about Robert Cadlick, HHS's current Assistant Secretary of Preparedness and Response, involved in Warp Speed, also an extremely shady individual with ties to stuff that was very shady going on before and during the anthrax attacks. Actually, the Dark Winter simulation, which I'll give a summary of in just a second, that term was coined by Robert Cadlick, who is now in this position. He's allegedly signing off on these contracts on behalf of HHS. He's a former lobbyist for intelligence and military contractors, and the shadiest pharmaceutical company you have probably never heard of called Emergent Biosolutions, which of course, now that he's in HHS, has been getting all of the money from his office for biodefense products. It's been going straight to the people he used to lobby for. I mean, it's pretty typical. But anyway, so what was Dark Winter? In June 2001, Analytic Services, Inc., better known as ANSWER, together with the Johns Hopkins, what is now the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, but it used to be something like the Civilian Center for the Study of Biodefense or something like that.
Just to clarify, Analytics, Inc. is also involved in Warp Speed.
Yeah, well, they're the parent company of this non-government intermediary.
Right. It's doing the Lord's work. Right. Like, right. I just want to set this aside just for a quick second for the viewers here. This is the thing that, like, when, I talk about connect the dots on this show. I talk about follow the money on this show. And it's like, same thing with the Epstein thing. The same names keep popping up, the same companies, the same thing. And all of this, you're going to keep hearing the same names. So I just want to make that very clear to the viewer. And watch and read all those articles Whitney's talked about, and watch the other interviews that we've done together. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so the Dark Winter simulation was a bioterrorism simulation that essentially predicted the anthrax attacks before they happened. The anthrax attacks, no one knew that was going to happen, or it wasn't made public until the beginning of October 2001. This was in June 2001. It talked about people receiving anthrax in the mail. It said that bioterrorism was going to be conducted by Saddam Hussein's Iraq and Al-Qaeda working together, which was the initial narrative of the anthrax attacks, until it was revealed that the anthrax had actually come from the U.S. military. Whoops.
What a weird thing. It's not like COVID maybe escaped from Fort Detrick.
But they tried to claim long after it was determined to be of a U.S. military source that it was actually from Iraq. And a lot of the people that were involved in making that claim and trying to keep the initial narrative had been involved in Dark Winter. But not only that, several Dark Winter participants immediately after 9/11 started going on mainstream media saying things like there's going to be an anthrax attack. And this also includes people that were part of the Project for a New American Century, whose members, of course, also included Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. They were going on cable news saying things like, next Al-Qaeda is going to hit us with anthrax. Right? Very disturbing. Also, on just a couple days after, I think it was, I can't remember how many days, but very soon after 9/11, the people that personally wrote and created the Dark Winter scenario briefed Dick Cheney all about what they had simulated. And, you know, Dick Cheney started threatened a senator or two about anthrax, and then all these anthrax letters go out. Fake anthrax letters were sent to some people that participated in Dark Winter. Their anthrax conveniently fake, while the senators that got anthrax letters were those that were refusing to pass the Patriot Act with no debate. All very convenient.
Wow.
Yeah. So the people that were actually at Dark Winter, you had former CIA directors like James Woolsey, also part of PNAC. You had former FBI directors. You had a lot of very high-ranking officials. And then you have Robert Cadluck, who made up the term Dark Winter, and he's leading HHS's coronavirus response right now, you know, among other people. But anyway, like I was saying, this was co-hosted by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, which is currently run by one of the people that was involved in Dark Winter named Thomas Inglesby. He's been a go-to guy for a lot of coronavirus interviews by mainstream media over the course of the year. And he's the guy that was the moderator at Event 201 last year. Oddly enough.
201 was the one that kind of predicted COVID-19, and then we did nothing.
Yes, but they also had one in 2018 called Clade X, where they simulated another coronavirus outbreak where there was no vaccine for the coronavirus, and it resulted in martial law and continuity of government protocols being activated. So yeah, they've been busy over the past couple decades, I guess you could say. But anyway, that's one half. The other half is this Analytic Services Inc., right? Which in 2017 acquired this company, Advanced Technology International, or ATI. And ATI is this intermediary in Operation Warp Speed that is making the contracts with vaccine companies that apparently the federal government has no records of. Right. So Analytic Services Inc. in 1998, the head of that became this lady named Dr. Ruth David, who was Deputy Director for Science and Technology at the CIA until she became head of this thing. And right before she left the CIA, she essentially created what would later become In-Q-Tel, which, if you know anything about In-Q-Tel, it's the CIA's venture capital arm responsible for Google and Palantir and, you know, the giant, you know, Silicon Valley companies controlling the world right now, essentially. So this lady is no joke. So not that long after she took the helm in 1999, she created the Institute for Homeland Security under Answer. The head of that was a guy named Randy Larson, who was one of the co-authors of Dark Winter. And Randy Larson and a bunch of other people from Answer in May 2001 were talking about the next Pearl Harbor, and that it was going to be firefighters being the first responders, and it was going to be an attack on American soil, all of this stuff in May 2001. And the PNAC guys, right, had written just a couple months prior, we need a new Pearl Harbor to push through our, you know, extreme agenda about militarizing everything and, you know, invading Iraq and things like that. So this is essentially those people. But what's interesting is that this Institute for Homeland Security, right after 9/11 and the anthrax attacks, DHS is created. And conveniently, the Institute for Homeland Security becomes DHS's first government think tank, and it is responsible for the research and development of pretty much everything DHS produced between when this was created in like 2003 or so until 2016. So, a lot of that creepy technology DHS has, you can thank Answer for that. But this ATI group is also interesting because before and after they were acquired by Answer, they're responsible for something called the Border Security Technology Consortium, which behalf of DHS is militarizing the U.S. border and giving custom borders patrol and ICE and all of this stuff insane access to mass surveillance technologies that are backed by like Peter Thiel and all these all the shady surveillance companies you've heard of in relation to what's going on in the U.S.-Mexico border. That's this ATI people. They're also giving you your COVID-19 vaccine. But you can't know about the contract. Yeah.
Totally comforting. And I don't know, it's weird. I don't think Rachel Maddow's talked about this. Am I wrong? No. They're still bringing back, like, the CNN and MSNBC crowd is literally pumping air into the dead horse of Russia Gate. They're still like screaming Russia while this is happening right here, right now. None of this has anything to do with Putin or Russia. This is our intelligence community working with all these corrupt agencies to do this behind our backs. I love having you on the show, Whitney, but it's always a little bit of a punch in the gut. I'm going to be right.
Yeah, I can understand. Honestly, when I started looking into this warp speed stuff that came out last week, I actually had a day where I was really like upset. I did the Epstein stuff. I reported on a lot of like really hairy, nasty things. But this upset me. It normally doesn't happen to me. It's very unsettling that the military is doing something this vast, this well-funded, that's intended, to affect every American living on U.S. soil, and no one's talking about it. It's super classified. It's unsettling. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that's so unsettling about it is it's not just some crazy plan they just hatched. Like, they've been working on this for over 2 decades.
Yeah.
And it's really scary because it really seems like this long con, this long game is like finally coming to fruition. With COVID, so we've had 19 years of the intelligence state, of the surveillance state built up thanks to 9/11, which you said in June of 2001, they're like, boy, we need a Pearl Harbor. Well, they got one. And kept America scared enough to just sign off on all of this. And so,
we had essentially 20 years of DHS having a ton of money to build up weapons to be used on the homeland. And it's not to defend the homeland against people from outside. It's about, quashing dissent, I would argue. The architects of what would later become Homeland Security in this period that included Answer and Ruth David, right, in 98, also included people like Richard Armitage, who was an advisor to the State Department of George W. Bush. But before that, he was involved in the Clinton-era National Defense Panel, and he essentially created this, started this push towards Homeland Defense. And before he was there, Richard Armitage was part of something that the CIA was doing in Vietnam called the Phoenix Program. And the Phoenix Program was all about quashing dissent by disappearing people, kidnapping people, murdering and torturing civilians in Vietnam. It's probably one of the most egregious things the CIA has ever done. It killed an estimated 40,000 civilians just in a couple of years. It's really insane. So the person that did the best expose of that is Doug Valentine. Doug Valentine has argued for years that DHS is intended it was essentially modeled after a lot of things the CIA learned after Phoenix. So, they've had 20 years to set this up. To think they would never use those technologies that they've developed for crowd control or riots and things like that, I think is honestly kind of naive. Another thing to consider is that the military, and I would argue this is related to Operation Warp Speed. In the coming days, I'll be doing more reports on it to sort of flesh this out. But the Pentagon has these plans to quote unquote modernize in order to maintain global military hegemony. Those plans have been around for a couple years. People have been ignoring them, I would argue, at their own peril, because a lot of what they talk about is, bringing in robots and AI and a lot of stuff. They plan to have more robot soldiers than human soldiers by 2025. That's not very far away from now. That's 4 years from now. Okay. Do you think that the military saying that, they have these plans that they say are essential for national security, do you think they're going to put that to a vote? And ask the American people, are you cool with AI murdering people on your behalf? Are you cool with, they also have plans to have, weapons controlled by soldiers' minds, like linking up soldiers' brains to machines. This sounds crazy, but it's on the Army's website. So I'd encourage you to go, just look at some of this stuff. Anyway, because of the coronavirus crisis, a lot of people haven't been paying attention to what the Pentagon's been doing this year. But it's very unsettling. For example, AI, the Pentagon is now, during the course of this year, it's not clear they've already done it, but they announced a couple months ago that now AI is going to be used to target people. A computer algorithm will determine who lives and who dies in US wars, starting now. Right? That's insane, but it hasn't been covered at all. But you can go to the Department of Defense website or army.mil and you look at their newsroom. I mean, they have it right out there. They say AI is now, the Pentagon will now use AI for lethality, is what they say. Meaning they're going to tell you who lives and who dies. That's a big step. It hasn't been covered. And they're doing a lot more than that. And it started 2 weeks ago. It was called Project Convergence, which is the beginning of these, the Pentagon implementing its modernization plans. So, there's a lot of stuff going on that people aren't talking about. And we're talking about Team Red and Team Blue, Biden and Trump, and the military is doing this behind the scenes. Keep in mind, too, the people directing these modernization efforts, it's not just the Pentagon. It's also Silicon Valley. And it's mainly Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO, who was on leading, essentially, the Defense Innovation Board, which influences a lot of Pentagon's decision-making, and also the National Security Commission on AI, which is driving a lot of this stuff. And Eric Schmidt is at the top of that, right? And he is very, it's Google, it's Amazon, it's Microsoft. All of these guys are also military and intelligence contractors. And on these commissions that are determining, where the country is going and all of this stuff in the national security state, what it's going to do, it's the military, it's the intelligence community, and it's Silicon Valley. And we're totally ignoring that. Those are the people running the show right now in the US in terms of policy. And, we're assuming that Biden and, and Trump are going to make a difference. It's no.
Oh, it's so hilarious that if Biden gets elected, the author of the 94 crime bill, and Kamala Harris, who did nothing but just put people behind bars for all kinds of awful reasons, they're going to somehow stop this fascism that's been stacking up for the last 2.5 decades.
The Silicon Valley people want Kamala in. Of
course.
They're her favorite. Or she's their favorite. Yeah.
She's absolutely their favorite. I mean, look, let's not forget, she, when she separated children as attorney general in the state of California. I mean, she got money. Steve Mnuchin donated to her attorney general campaign. And then she didn't prosecute Steve Mnuchin when she had all this evidence against One West Bank for mortgage fraud. And then he donated to her senatorial campaign. So this notion that she's going to resist this is hilarious to me. I mean, it's just, when you really listen to this, you see how professional wrestling our politics really are. It is literally just pick these predetermined candidate. It's professional wrestling. I mean, it's just
buying them time. Honestly, it's buying them time, because what they don't want is people to realize that no political savior is coming to save us. Right? We need to stop thinking that, if we get, Bernard Sanders in the White House, it'll magically fix all of the U.S.'s problems. Or if we get person X or person Y or whoever in the White House, one man isn't going to change all of this crap. right? You know, we are the saviors that we've been waiting for. You're not going to get a solution at the ballot box, especially this year, right?
Especially,
so, you know, they're buying time, having people distracted by this, not paying attention to what's going on. And it's, you know, we need to stop feeding that beast, I guess you could say. I mean, you know, it's time to focus our attention on things that are actually going on that affect everyone, and to try and fight against this manufactured division they're trying to create in the country. We have bigger fish to fry right now, you know?
Yeah, they have to keep us divided. And you're right. It's such a, like 4 years ago was the time. If Bernie Sanders was the guy we thought he was, 4 years ago, he would have left and ran as an independent and maybe things would have changed. But he clearly was just there to sheep herd. I don't know if he's just paid, if he's a sucker, or they like said, we're going to kill your grandchildren. I don't know what. Who
knows? It could have been all three. I don't know.
It could have been all three. But yeah, the notion that like some politician is going to swoop in and save everybody is just a joke, because I mean, everyone in outrage, and rightfully so, about, you know, unmarked federal agents swooping people off the streets in Portland, Oregon. But a lot of those...
They did that at Occupy. They did that at Occupy Wall Street, and no one cared.
I know, that's the thing.
That was like 8 years ago.
They only care when a Republican does it. So like when Obama was doing it, they didn't seem to have a problem with it. Like,
yeah.
And who was his vice president?
They're so mad. Yeah.
It's maddening that they don't want to see this. And it's like, part of me is like, oh, I'd love for Biden to win. Okay, Trump's gone, and then you'll see Biden be a crazy fascist. Like, you know, and then what are you going to do? You're going to go back.
Fascism is here now.
I know.
You know.
They like I've told people, I'm like, this has been happening for a long time. They snatched up during Occupy. They did it at Standing Rock. They've done it. I mean, this has been happening for a long, long time, and Americans just keep getting caught up in this every 4-year election cycle crap and buy whatever bullshit is sent to them. And the college educated neoliberals are actually worse, because they technically should know better. And yet they want to just go Russia and blame Jill Stein or whatever. When it's like the intelligence state, they're the permanent state. They're never voted in or out. They're there. The CIA has been there for decades, calling the shots, doing these things, doing these operations, and then figuring out, oh, we need to work with Silicon Valley. We need to work with the, you know, pharmaceutical companies. They've had offices in Hollywood since the late 40s, early 50s. I mean, they get script approval on the Marvel movies. Like, when are people going to wake up to the fact that these two parties don't care? I mean, they're literally little office wings of the whole corporate intelligence deep state. It's like there's this massive building, and there's a whole floor for war, and a whole floor for banking, and a whole floor for pharmaceuticals. And then there's this little Republican wing, and they talk about the NRA and the Bible. And then there's this little Democratic wing where they say they care about climate change, but don't give a shit. And then they put a rainbow flag on it, and that's it. And we think that all these two parties are so different, and it's preposterous. And again, the questions: why are nobody asking about this? Why isn't the media talking about this? Why is nobody going, hey, a secretive militarized vaccine? I mean, it always begs the question to me, like, is Trump's border wall to keep others out or to keep us in? Like, I really feel like they're anticipating this crazy civil war, which a bunch of people are going to try to leave. They can't, because we've mishandled COVID so much. So people are just going to run across the border in Canada. And then what? They're going to send AIs after? I mean, I'm trying not to get too goddamn like Terminator, but this is just listening to this is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's really nuts. And I'm just, you know, I just feel like there's so few people talking about this stuff. The National Security Commission on AI is essentially driving where the future of the national security state, which is like the real government, right, is going. And they essentially say their view is, we will lose to China unless we have better AI than we do. The way to get better AI than China is to get more data to train AI algorithms on than China can get. China has essentially a lot of sensors and smart city stuff already set up in there. You know, they have a bigger population. So, you know, they feel like they're not they're at a disadvantage for acquiring large amounts of data. So essentially they have a plan that they made last May about essentially remaking major facets of American society and introducing AI in a huge way into the US economy, daily life, essentially changing all of that. Obviously, in any other situation, there would be huge resistance to that because, as we know, AI will, a lot of people have been concerned about it from a long time, that it'll take people's jobs and whatever. Along comes coronavirus, people are unemployed anyway, and a lot of the stuff that these guys planned out last year has been happening, right, under the guise of fighting the pandemic or things like that. So this is very unsettling. But what's interesting is that the head of all of this, right, Eric Schmidt, the former Google guy, he says their best chance to push this in first and get people used to this first is healthcare. And that is why we are seeing this huge push to implement AI in healthcare. If you haven't been paying attention to this, maybe you haven't noticed, but now they're using AI to determine, Google and the Pentagon recently announced a partnership where they're going to develop models where AI will predictively diagnose you with diseases, whether it's cancer or COVID-19, right? That's just the beginning of this, right? It's all very disturbing on a huge level. But again, they feel that it's a national security imperative that the U.S. maintain global military hegemony. And the way to do this is to have better AI than China. This is how they're thinking. They do not want to put this shit to a vote. They do not want to ask people's opinion. They don't care about your opinion, right? They're saying, we have to maintain hegemony, period. This is how we have to do it, period. And so that's what's going to happen. So they're trying to manufacture consent for that shit using the coronavirus pandemic, as a justification, but they can only do that for so long. At some point, they can't use the pandemic anymore to justify where they want to take this stuff. Right. So what are they going to do? They're going to run into resistance at some point. They're making plans to get around that. What those plans are, I don't know, but it seems like warp speed, given that you have a lot of involvement of the military, may have something to do with that. It's also, there's actually a lot of ties to Google in Operation Warp Speed as well. That I'll be getting into in a couple weeks. For example, it hasn't been reported yet, but Google is one of the major investors backing the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Operation Warp Speed bought 300 million doses of that before it's even been approved for safety. That vaccine has had to pause trials twice because, one lady was paralyzed from it and stuff like this. I mean, it's that's bad. Also, the vaccine coordinator for Operation Warp Speed, the former DARPA guy, he runs a portfolio that still runs a portfolio that he developed, that he managed at DARPA, and that has now been spun off into a commercial venture that is funded and backed by Google. Then you have the head of Operation Warp Speed, Moncef Slaoui. He used to be a vice president at GlaxoSmithKline. He created a firm together with Google in 2016 that's called Galvani Bioelectronics. And what Moncef Slaoui wants to do, well, literally, if I say it, everyone will be like, wow, Whitney, you've really gone off the rails. You're a crazy conspiracy theorist. So I would just urge you to look up Moncef Slaoui in bioelectronic medicine and see how he describes it. Because it's essentially like, one mainstream media outlet described it as hacking the nervous system with nanotechnology. Like, these are not normal people. And they're being given a blank check to write, vaccine contracts that we can't have access to. We can't know what's going on. And HHS, the healthcare agency that's supposed to be part of this, has no records of any of these contracts, right? And then the people that were responsible for freaking Dark Winter are the people awarding them, This should be setting off such major red flags for people. And it's not. And I'm honestly what do I do with this except do interviews where I'm please pay attention. I mean, there's not a ton of time left, right? No. Most likely before the election, there's going to be a huge deplatforming wave. Last September, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Twitter all met with DHS, the head of the U.S. intelligence community, to talk about how they were going to protect public discourse ahead of the 2020 election and deplatform conspiracy theorists and people that are, Russian bots and now Chinese bots and Iranian bots. It's not just Russia and China anymore, right? So, don't expect to be able to be talking about this for that much longer on places like Twitter and Facebook.
Well, it's a good thing that you and I are both on rockfin.com because they can't deplatform us. Well, Whitney, this is really thank you for coming on the show and doing all this work and tying everything from Event 201 to Dark Winter to this now Operation Warp. Because this is just, it's really just concerning that they're really trying to I really feel like the pushing us into civil war has to be part of this somehow, because maybe that's when they want the AIs, right? Because
the more chaos they create, the more they can clamp down and say they have to restore order, and that allows them to restore order however they see fit, right?
Yeah, and also there's no courts, there's no habeas court, there's no they don't need, there's no laws. They can just, we got to restore order. They can kick down your door for whatever reason because of order. They can release AI cops into the streets. And people keep shooting cops. Oh, the Antifa, they're so angry. They keep killing cops. So we can't risk cops' lives anymore. So now we're just going to release AIs into this mayhem as part of the martial law. And these robots are going to determine who lives and who dies.
I mean, the Pentagon's already using it for that, and they bought all these heads-up display, futuristic display helmets for all U.S. soldiers to use next year, where AI is going to highlight the target in red, and then they'll just shoot. And they say that a person is still deciding who to shoot or not, but I mean, AI is taking a lot of that decision-making away from people and putting it in the hands of an algorithm designed by Silicon Valley.
Ugh.
In the Pentagon, in DARPA. So can we please stop talking about Biden and Trump? It's a distraction.
Which guy is going to let the AI armies take us over? Is really a thing to discuss. So, well, Whitney, so great for you to take time and do this. You do extensive work. Where can people read these articles and listen to your podcast and all of that?
Well, all my upcoming stuff on Operation Warp Speed, like I said, this is just the introduction, and there is tons of more info there. I mean, this is just scratching the surface, honestly, which is why I'm so alarmed by it, honestly. So that's all going to be coming out on The Last American Vagabond, which is lastamericanvagabond.com. But all of my past work, not all of it. I mean, I used to write for Mint Press News. So, I mean, if you want my past work, you'd have to go to my author page there. But most of my work from the past year, you can find on unlimitedhangout.com. And also I have a Rockfin channel, like you mentioned, also called Unlimited Hangout, where I have a podcast and audio versions of my longer articles for people that don't like to read. So, or can't read, there's some people that, listen, try and consume news when they're at work, right? And they can only do it by listening. So it's for people like that too.
Well, cool. And I would remind everybody, that's the wonderful thing about Rockfin. So you can sign up to Rockfin for free. And for $10 a month, you get all of Whitney's premium content and mine and every single content creator's premium content. You get it at rockfin.com. So it's a great platform. It's blockchain. It's cryptocurrency. It can't be bought out by the Googles of the world. And they don't censor us at all, any way, shape, or form, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, it's nice.
So if you're new to all of this, please go read Whitney's past articles at Last American Vagabond, Unlimited Hangout, and even Mint Press News, because that's how I first got to know you, was reading your stuff about Epstein, and I was covering Epstein, so we had you on the show. So thank you so much for taking your time, Whitney, and joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for letting me rant and ramble about the stuff. It's just, honestly, I wish more people were paying attention to what's going on instead of just being sheep-herded into the same two-party distraction that's been going on, every 4 years. But, sometimes it's fun to laugh at and whatever, but, there's a lot of other things going on that deserve our attention.
Yeah, I always watch it just to see how they're lying to us. oh, this is the propaganda they're pushing. Like I watched that debate and I said, oh, this is a Republican debate. They're just like Biden's trying to get like Mitt Romney Republicans. I'm like, oh, wow. And there's no policy issue. And
No.
they basically just said I was like, oh, okay. So they just flat out said nothing will change regardless of which one of these idiots you vote for. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
thanks for that's when the only time I watch mainstream media is to go, what lies are they feeding me today?
Mhm.
And what are they deliberately not covering? And Operation Warp Speed is one of them. So you're welcome on the show anytime. You always reach out to me
Thank
when
you.
you've got new info. You know that. So we love having you on the show. And everybody, please check out her work because she's doing great stuff. So thank you so much, Whitney. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Graham.
Bye-bye. Oh, wow. So yeah, this is the actually go here. I just want to show you the article real quick again. Just there it is. Operation Warp Speed is using a CIA-linked contractor to keep COVID-19 vaccine contracts secret. That's why you watch this show, because we have people like Whitney Webb on. She should be on CNN right now telling this story, but they won't never have her on. Right? She should be like being interviewed by Anderson Cooper or Joyanne Reed or Rachel Maddow. Like, what? And tell us and the American people should be like outraged that this is happening. But it's by design. It's by design. So thanks for watching this show. Like, share, subscribe. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood. Go to rockfin.com/Graham Elwood. And of course, my audio podcast is on iTunes and Spotify, the Political Vigilante podcast. It is in the news and politics section. And then GrahamElwood.com. I have a PayPal button. I have a Venmo at Graham-Elwood. All great ways to support the show. Boom. Shave your knuckles for justice.